Alright, so hunting season is just getting started and we're just about getting ready to go out on our annual elk hunting trip. We'll be out for 2 weeks, and part of what I do to get prepared for that is I make pemmican. And pemmican is the original energy food. It's basically jerky, dried nuts, fruit, and you pour rendered tallow or fat over it. And that fat is obviously really high in calories, and it'll help keep you going for a long time. So we've got a couple of things to do. I've got some dried fruit. I've got some elk burger here from last year's elk, and I went and got some beef tallow from the butcher. Now we're gonna have to render that out, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. You can use, I went ahead and got beef tallow. You can use elk or deer, but it's a little bit too waxy tasting for my taste. It kind of, it almost like coats the inside of your mouth. So first thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna get this burger. We have to dehydrate everything, and we want it pretty dry because we're gonna end up putting this stuff in the blender and basically pulverizing it. And so I'm just gonna spread this out on the dehydrator trays. And we've been canning, so we've got canned tomatoes and salsa and stuff like that everywhere. So I'm going to try to get this spread out as thin as I can and get this on, and then we'll start rendering that fat out. Lean cuts of meat work really well. Alright, we got it all spread out. Let's put it on the dehydrator. All right, we'll let that go overnight. We'll go ahead and start rendering out our fat. All right, so when you're rendering fat, I've got a good cast iron skillet here. You want something that with some heft to it, something that's going to hold the heat, and you want a low flame because you want to heat this stuff up slowly, at least to start with. If you try to fry it like bacon, you're gonna end up burning something. And so I'm gonna let this skillet heat up a little bit, and I've got all my tallow right here, and it's cut into pieces and strips, and I'm just gonna throw a couple of pieces in here, and as it heats up, that fat's gonna start melting. And then once you get a good pool of fat in the bottom of this skillet, you can crank the heat up just a little bit, but you don't want to go too fast. Alright, so all the fat's pretty much rendered out. I've went ahead and scooped the cracklings out and put them in that bowl. You can throw some salt on those things and eat them if you want. They're actually not bad.
Is that good, Finn?
Uh-huh.
Alright, so this is cooled down pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and just strain it. And then this will solidify into just pure white tallow, and then we can remelt that and pour it over. When we get ready, we can pour it over our other ingredients to make our pemmican. So I'm just going to let this cool overnight. Alright, so the meat's all dried out. Our tallow is all solidified now. It's set overnight. I'm going to have to remelt that. But I'm going to go ahead and put this meat in our blender and kind of grind it up a little bit. Alright, I'm going to throw some I've got some dried blueberries here, some sunflower seeds, and then some raisins. I'm going to throw some of these blueberries in there. The raisins and fruit you kind of got to do just a little bit at a time, because they'll, if you put a bunch in there, they'll gum up your blender. There's still a little bit of moisture and sugar and stuff in that fruit, and when it gets warm, it just turns into this big mass and it just doesn't blend up very well. Alright, so I've got all the nuts, the fruit, and the meat all ground up and poured in this pot together, and the fruit's going to be kind of sticky, but we're basically just going to take this stuff and knead it all together, and I got to melt a little bit of that fat that we rendered out. We'll pour some of this in there and just knead it all up into a big ball, and then we can form it into whatever shape we want, whether we want it into little balls or into flatter bars or anything like that. So yeah, these big globs of fruit like that, just break those things up, and then the dry ingredients will help keep them from sticking back together. We just want to try to break this up as good as we can. Alright, so I've got all my ingredients kind of kneaded up together. Got those big globs of fruit and stuff kind of broken up, and then I've remelted some of our fat and then let that cool a little bit. Now I'm just going to pour this right in there on top of it. Now I know a lot of you are going to want an exact recipe, but I don't operate that way, so you're just going to have to figure things out. I kind of do even portions of meat, nuts, and fruits, and then the amount of fat that you put in there really is going to depend on, one, your taste, and then two, the weather that you're going to be out in. If it's warm, you don't want a lot of fat because it's going to melt. If you're hunting in cold weather, I tend to put more fat in it. One, it doesn't melt. Two, you're burning more energy just staying warm, so more fat helps. So we're just going to knead all this stuff together, and this stuff's still fairly warm, so it's going to be oily. But when this cools, we're gonna go ahead and put this on a tray, and then we're going to stick it in the fridge, and when that cools, it's going to solidify and turn into bars. You can form this stuff out however you want. I mean, you can roll it into balls or whatever. Alright, put her in the fridge. And so I went ahead and sprinkled a little bit of salt on there. That's optional. I think it makes it taste better. Alright, so this stuff is pretty much done. All I'm going to do is cut this into squares, stick it in a bag, and as long as you keep it somewhat cool, it'll stay together pretty well. You know, if you stick it in your pocket, it's going to turn into a sticky mess because your body heat's going to heat it up. But this stuff is awesome for, it doesn't weigh a whole lot. It's packed full of energy. It's great for cold weather hunting. Helps keep your metabolism up, keeps you warm. But if you haven't ever tried it, give it a try. It like I said, it works awesome, and it tastes pretty doggone good too. So we'll see you next time. Good luck this season.